Welcome back to Scherable. I'm Bill Scher. The quality of my backdrops may be declining over time, but hopefully get back to my semi-formal office one of these days. It's Tuesday. It's a day before the scheduled vice presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. So I thought about what to look for in that. And this is a particularly interesting debate to me, not because it's going to have any impact at all on the presidential election. I'm sure it will have zero. I can't think of a vice presidential debate that's ever had an impact on the presidential outcome. The most dramatic one is Lloyd Benson telling Dan Quayle, "You're no Jack Kennedy," even though Quayle had already been pretty maligned at that point. He was not a significant drag, if any drag at all, to George H.W. Bush in '88. We fondly remember the James Stockdale, "Who am I? Why am I here?" debate. Perhaps that slowed any chance for Ross Perot to make a comeback in the fall of '92, but I think that was not really determinative there either. Otherwise, they're pretty nondescript affairs. But there's the main aspect why I think this is interesting is it's not inconceivable that you're looking at a preview of the 2024 race. Yes, I know Biden can still run again. He's made no pledge not to. He would be 82, but there's no age limit. If he was in good shape and having a popular presidency, he may well run again. If I was Biden, I wouldn't. If I was Biden, I'd go out on top. And second terms are generally pretty. They're slogs. Might as well go out while the getting's good. Enjoy your last few years of retirement. But I can't know. If he did not run, as I've said in other occasions, vice presidents have a really good track record in presidential primaries. Now, granted, we've only had so many. The modern primary system only begins in 1972. But every former vice president who has attempted to run has won his party's primary, with the lone exception of Quayle. And not only was Quayle uniquely unpopular, he was running against George W. Bush, the son of the person he served under. So that's it's hard to get the benefit of party loyalty and 4 years of exposure to the public when you're up against the name brand. And that might be an issue for Pence. It's possible that Donald Trump Sr. runs in 2024. It's possible that Donald Trump Jr. runs in 2024. I suppose we can't discount an Ivanka or an Eric or a Kushner. Weird things can happen when you have a Trumps in your midst. But presuming there isn't somebody named Trump or in the Trump family running, you may say Pence is bland. He doesn't have the bombastic panache of Trump and all that. But 4 years in the public eye, traveling the country, building up donor networks, it's not nothing. And that's a large reason why, VPs, even of unpopular presidents, like Walter Mondale, it might be harder for Walter Mondale to win the nomination than a Joe Biden or a George H.W. Bush coming off the heels of Ronald Reagan. But he still did. Still had levers to pull. So it's certainly plausible. And if Biden did not run again, Harris might have a challenger or two or several. But being BP would give her an enormous leg up, barring Biden being immensely unpopular. So if you're Pence, you're kind of stuck with what you got. You've been a Trump sycophant. That's why you're here. That's why you have stature in the party to betray him in some way is not going to do you much good at this juncture. The thing that's going to carry him through in 2024 is I stuck by his side through thick and thin. Other people want to run as the anti-Trump. That's their business, and maybe that will work. But what's going to make sense for Pence is I stood by Trump. I might be a more palatable version. I might be more traditionally Republican in various areas, particularly foreign policy. But the hardcore Trumpers can look at me and say, I stuck by him. Harris, I'm more curious about what she might do, because her value in the short run is she is providing some help on shoring up the left flank. She's not a socialist. You still have Kamala as a cop people out there. You still see anecdotes of younger African Americans who are unhappy with her prosecutorial record. But she still is a fairly liberal progressive Democrat. She speaks using liberal progressive terminology. She elevates, and she's elevated and highlighted her lineage as the child of Berkeley civil rights activists. Unlike Biden has Scranton. Biden leans on his white working class bona fides as much as possible. When Barack Obama ran in 2008, you heard a lot of talk about his white family, that he was a product of Kansas, of Kansas descendants. He wanted that to be part of his bio too. So Kamala doesn't have any of that to work with, and she hasn't tried to be something she's not. She's presented herself as who she is, who she was raised by. To the extent that she is ideologically nuanced, it is that she was a prosecutor, so she does bring out that pragmatism part of her in speaking of her philosophy. But bio-wise, she doesn't have a middle America thing to trade on. And so she has been talking in more pointed liberal progressive language than Biden has. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed away and Amy Coney Barrett was nominated, you are seeing Kamala talk a little bit more eagerly about the threat to abortion rights than Biden does. Biden does talk about it. He did mention it briefly in the debate. He was asked about it last night at the MSNBC town hall, spoke about passing a law enshrining the right to Roe in law. So it's not that he's ditching it, but he doesn't go out of his way to emphasize it. I know the speech that Kamala gave, that was elevated more. That's a traditional VP function, to be more of a liaison to the base, while the person at the top of the ticket leans more to the middle. So that's a perfectly sensible partnership, two-pronged approach to running for this immediate election. But if I'm Kamala and I'm thinking about 2024 or 2028, you have 4 to 8 years to introduce yourself to the public as something more than a Bay Area, California, liberal Democratic politician. The reason why Biden is poised to win a broad geographic mandate is that he's pulling from all these different constituencies, which I talked about on the last Scherable and in my recent Real Clear Politics column. To the extent that Democrats thought demographics is destiny for them, because Obama won twice. The country's getting more urban, suburban, less rural, more racially diverse. They thought that was going to let them coast from election to election. And it obviously helped Barack Obama, but there were limits to that thinking. Obama's reelection was more narrow in 2012 than it was in 2008. And the limits of that logic fully caught up to them in 2016. Biden is getting more white seniors, more white working class, adding to that increasingly racially diverse constituency. So that the combination of those things are what's helping in states like Arizona and Florida, potentially Georgia, North Carolina. So what does Kamala Harris do to start the process of being more appealing to wider areas, non-coastal areas of the country? There was just a poll that came out by YouGov. That YouGov tested Biden-Trump, they tested Biden-Pence, and they tested Harris-Pence. And with registered voters, Biden beat Trump by 8. He beat Pence by 6. So Pence gets a little bit back of some of those Republicans who are souring on Trump. And then Harris beat Pence by 1. So you can see, with just one poll, maybe other polls will be different, but it seems plausible, seems logical that Biden's 5-decade experience in the public limelight and heavy emphasis on his white working class background and his regular appeals to bipartisanship and unity, he is getting more pull from those right-leaning Republicans and independents than Kamala is getting out of the gate. So I see here in the live chat, what policies can Kamala talk about without getting too far outside of what Biden has said already? I don't think it's about getting to the right of Biden. She shouldn't introduce something out of the blue at this debate. I think it's a question of the language she uses, the examples she pulls from, how much does she try to sound like Biden as opposed to sounding like a Bay Area Democrat. You don't want to be phony about it. You don't want to seem like you're not being who you are. So that's why it's tricky. I don't claim to argue it's some sort of simple thing that she can do and everything's going to fall into place right away. But it would seem logical to me to start that process at the first media event you're participating in that's going to be seen by a very broad swath of the American public. Running in a Democratic presidential primary, you're largely seen by fellow Democrats, up to and including your acceptance speech at the Democratic National Convention. This is going to have a broader audience. People who have probably not seen you in a concentrated form in your entire public life. So maybe it's not the time to repeat several times you're the child of Berkeley activists. That might not be the thing to do. We haven't heard it yet. It's happening in about an hour or so. Biden's apparently going to speak about racial unity at Gettysburg later today. The more she is trading on Biden's themes, and she's pretty good at this now. I mean, people thought before, how is Biden going to pick her? She was so mean to him at the debate. The way to solve that problem is to echo what the boss says and use his script, and those problems go away, which is, I think, largely what is happening right now. I think now is the time to lean into that more, lean into the Biden framework more, and not do as much base appeal at this juncture. Now, she will have lots of opportunity to attack Pence aggressively. One thing Kamala is good at is being a prosecutor. She is good at Senate testimony and interrogating witnesses. That's a very good debate skill to have. And Pence is in an inherently weak position. He has to defend Trump, who is manifestly unpopular at this point, and do so without the Trump bombast. In a way that a lot of folks can sort of see on some level he doesn't even fully believe himself. So I'm sure Kamala will be very prepped. She'll know the things that Pence has said in the past that don't square with things that Trump says now and try to get him on contradictions. That'll be a lot harder for Pence to do. I mean, maybe Pence is going to try to bring up the busing thing all over again. I think Kamala can more easily say, we had a disagreement about that. It doesn't change how I feel about Joe Biden as a person and what I believe is true in his heart. And the fact that he can look past that disagreement and and have me join him on this team shows how magnanimous he is and how he would govern the country in a unified way. I think that's an easy thing to counter with. Pence has the harder job in this debate. And so the challenge for Kamala is to hit those spots. She should be aggressive. She shouldn't be a passive debater. But I think there are limits. You don't want to come across excessively aggressive. I mean, even Biden felt sheepish about calling Trump a clown last night and said, "Well, I shouldn't have said that." Some will say, "Well, a white male can lean farther than an African American woman can," and without getting into that discussion, let's face it, Trump's outrageous bullying has destroyed him in this campaign. I mean, it seems kind of crazy that for some people that was the breaking point. I mean, from my perspective, this is the same old Trump. For other people, and I've seen anecdotally in TV interviews or blog posts and such. There's a conservative columnist at the Las Vegas Review-Journal, which is the Sheldon Adelson-owned newspaper, and she said Trump may have lost me in this debate. Not that she was going to run and vote for Biden. She said that too, but it just shows how deep into the conservative base people were unimpressed with Trump's boorishness. So it's not like white males get a free pass for every obnoxious thing that they do, even though they may get plenty of advantages in all sorts of ways. So there is some legitimate reason for Kamala just to be a little careful, and it's a fine line to be aggressive and take out your opponent while at the same time being an appealing leadership figure for the broader public. So hitting that stride, I think, is her biggest challenge. I see another question here. Crosstalk. Will there be a lot of crosstalk tomorrow? I mean, Pence is not Trump. And so I don't think, people were going to interrupt. There's always some interruption in debates, but to the degree that we saw in the last debate, I think is almost impossible for a non-Trump politician to do. And as much as that made people upset at the time, I don't think people should be bothered by loose moderation, because when you have tight moderation, when you have overly scripted debates, they cease to be debates. It's talking point, rebuttal, talking point, next question. We had some of those debates in our history of presidential debates, and they're boring and they don't really illuminate anything. You let the kids play. You're in the NBA playoffs. Don't call the touch fouls. You see where the candidates are. You see them for where they really are. They get off of the scripts, and they speak from the heart, or lack of heart, if you will. And in this case, that has penalized Trump significantly. We have a 14-point lead in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll. We have a 16-point lead in the CNN poll. We have a 12-point lead with Pennsylvania registered voters in the Monmouth poll. These are quality polls. It's possible that that's a little inflated and it might narrow to some extent over the course of the next month. Maybe some weird shoe's going to drop that's going to change the whole game. I don't know. But it's a pretty clear indication that the debate was a bad dent in the Trump campaign. And it already was the case that for Trump to win would require the biggest comeback in history for an elected incumbent. Now, this deep into October for any incumbent. Now you can count Truman in the mix. Truman came back from 6 points in late September. Trump is now farther back than that. So can things happen for the first time? Can history be made? Sure. But Trump has dug himself a very, very, very big hole from this debate. And I don't think we can take the COVID diagnosis and say that's the reason for these numbers, because these numbers were generally taken in the CNN and MSNBC and Monmouth poll. These are taken, latter part of last week when the diagnosis was just coming in. It doesn't even account for, the joyride on Sunday and the return home on Monday. We need polling later this week and next week to kind of capture the public reaction to that stuff. My friend Rich, should Kamala try to make an issue at the top of the debate of Pence even being at the debate, given his potential exposure? She's there, so she can't make too big a deal of it. If he was a health risk, if she felt that, she should not show. So that's a harder point for her to make. I think she can very easily talk about, Trump's irresponsibility. But if you're going to have that standard, you have to abide by it yourself. And for whatever reason, she's not doing that. Maybe I think they're having the plexiglass. Maybe she should be masked. Maybe she should have the extra protection. Do the whole debate masked. I don't think that would be a bad idea at all, quite frankly. One more comment. Harris has a tendency to make corny jokes. Penn will make the case about the economy before COVID, and he'll have a point. The counter to that point is the economy was going on the same trajectory that it was already on. It was already growing under Obama. It continued to grow, and then it tanked after COVID. So it's not an example in and of itself of Trump not having economic know-how. But think about it this way. Most of what a president does has nothing to do with the economy. Presidents tend to get credit and blame unfairly because most of what they do is irrelevant to it. The one thing Trump did is the tax cut. And since we didn't see a change in the trajectory was basically the same after that, I would not credit the tax cut for it. Obviously, Pence and Trump would try to do so. So for the sake of argument, give that to them. But most of what a president does to help the economy is keep the house in order, keep things stable, don't go off half-cocked. And letting a pandemic run wild is not that. So Trump and Pence try to separate those things. I was doing great on the economy, then this virus came along. Well, that's the thing that you do have responsibility over. You do have public health responsibilities. You run a public health division of the government, and you did not do the basic things that other countries did do successfully that were possible to do, and you did not do them. A question from Dan here. Are there historic examples of a prosecutor in a debate? I got to think about that. I don't know off the top of my head. Certainly it must have been lawyers. Obama was a lawyer. Bill Clinton was a lawyer. I don't know off the top of my head if we've had prosecutors. But what prosecutors are good at doing is forming pointed questions to which you already know the answer to. That's where prosecutors are at their best. One of Kamala's weak moments was when she was questioning Kavanaugh about some issue with his law firm. And it seemed like in the moment she did know where she was going with it, but then there was no payoff. So she didn't have the answer in the back pocket that maybe you thought she did. So those lines are not good lines for prosecutors to go down. When you know what the answer is and know what your adversary is going to say or should say, that's when you can really pin them down. And I suspect Kamala is going to be pretty briefed on multiple fronts where she can do that. I probably should wrap things up here. We are still in remote schooling. My younger one is upstairs here, finishing up her school day. And I got we're actually not at my house right now. That's why we have a different decor. It's my mother's house. But I think I will do another live stream debate commentary tomorrow, so long as the children cooperate. So keep an eye out for a live stream popping up around 9 o'clock tomorrow, and I will talk to you then. Thanks so much. And I should always got to remember this. Please subscribe. Subscribing is important. If you don't subscribe, then it's harder for me to do things because I can't get any ad revenue out of this whole enterprise. So subscribing is important. Watching is important. If you can subscribe, I'd appreciate it. And I'll see you tomorrow at the debate. Take care.